Hi, everyone. This is Alan Arnett. Just before we start this next podcast, just a little heads up that I recorded this over a satellite network and we have spotty connection, so at times it'll drop out. I edited as much of the dropouts as I can, but I don't think it'll affect the overall quality of this particular interview with Adrian Bollinger. So here it is. Hey, everybody. Alan Arnett here with another podcast on the blog on alanarnett.com. It is Tuesday, October 10th. And I have with me one of my favorite regular guests, Mr. Dr. Reverend Adrian Bollinger, AB. Hey, Adrian, how you doing, man? Where are you?
I'm great. It's great to be here and chatting with you again, Alan, in another Himalayan season. I'm actually in the High Sierra in California. Emily, my wife, and I, along with our son Arrow, have been on a climbing trip down to Yosemite, where she has a project this fall, and I've been supporting her. But we decided to get out of the ditch, out of the valley for a few days, and come to the High Sierra with some friends. So, rock climbing and camping outside, it's been great.
And I understand that you've tricked out this van, and so you guys are now living the van life.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm not going to be a full-time year-round van lifer. It seems about 2 weeks at a time is about what I can handle. It's a pretty enclosed space for a family of three and a dog, but it's really amazing. And we were joking a little bit before we got on that the joys of Starlink for all its potential negatives in the world, which there are some. It enables me to continue to run Alpenglow expeditions, to have expeditions in the field around the world right now, and to do my work each morning and then get climbing in with the family. It's pretty great.
So I heard a rumor that Arrow Red pointed to 5'11". Is that true?
He's a little ways out from that, although I think, that's a good Instagram versus reality, because I'm sure we put a post on Instagram that looked like he was sending 5'11", but he's actually still working on, he's not even sure he wants to crawl yet. He's a little behind on the crawling front. I think he has everything he needs in life. So he's just taking his time.
Hey, why take the risk of falling, right? How old is he now? 6 months?
He's
Nine
10
months?
months now. It's
10 months,
going
10
so
months.
fast. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll actually we haven't chatted about this, but we're actually going to bring him to Fortsay to meet Dorje Sonam Sherpa, the Sardar I've worked with for 2 decades, and a lot of our Sherpa family. So he'll celebrate his first birthday in Fortsay with our extended fam if everything goes according to plan.
Will he get blessed by a llama while you're over there?
I mean, I certainly hope so. Pangboche has, of course, changed a lot, and I don't know the llamas like I used to there, but I'm sure we'll have a ceremony in Forte or somewhere. And just, he won't remember any of it, but I think like the importance of just having kind of like travel and different cultures and our extended family around the world being a part of his life, we wanted to start that young. So we're going to head over
I
this fall.
I know of people that have taken their really infants over to Nepal and had a
Yeah.
had a llama like a lama Geshe or someone bless them,
Yeah.
and that was, like you say, it was meaningful for the family. The kids probably going, hey, leave me alone.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I know Melissa Arnott went last year, I think, with her 4-month-old, and Emily and I have been quizzing her a lot on tips and tricks and what she learned. So we have good people who went before us, bringing young kids to the valley.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So we have a lot to talk about. Sadly, some of it is not particularly pleasant regarding way too many deaths happening in the mountains these days.
Yeah.
But I think we can have a very good conversation about that without, trying to be, going into the blame or shame game, and just trying to understand a little bit about how these things can be prevented in the future. And you have a tremendous amount of knowledge on all these areas, from avalanches to rescuing other people in the mountains and things like that. But first off, so Alpenglow is back to Everest in spring of 24 after how many years?
Yeah, I mean, our last season there was 2019. So,
Wow.
kind of rewinding the clock, 2020 was the season when everyone canceled as COVID began. And we canceled just a few weeks before the season started. And then since then, China has not reopened their borders really for tourism until this autumn. And Alpenglow only now guides Everest from the north side of the mountain. We really contemplated going back to the south, of course, from a financial business side that would have helped us, but we decided to stick to the reasons we feel strongly about our reasons for being on the north side. So we waited. and Tibet has not reopened for tourism until really 3 weeks ago, as you know. So even this autumn was a bit complicated. We had a Cho-Yu team that we were really excited to go and climb the mountain and really believed everything would open in time, and we ended up canceling. We received our mountain permits, but the border just wasn't going to open in time for our Sherpa to
Yeah.
get in to begin doing the setup that we wanted to have a successful season. Now, we all know over 100 climbers did enter Tibet this year, and there was some success on Cho-Yu before the accident on Shishapangma. And there are even rumors there was a team on Everest. And so, we're happy to see the Tibet border reopened. And all of our local contacts really told us like they're using this season, even though it opened very late. So maybe some it's successful and moving forward, planning on a smooth spring in Tibet.
Oh, cool. I know that your staff and the Sherpas, everybody will be really thrilled to be able to get back into it again. Just anything special, or just just the old standard boring route?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, really nothing special. I'm excited for what I think will be a smaller season, both on the north side of the mountain and in our team. Some people will continue to wait on the sidelines to make sure that Tibet
Sure.
does have their act together before committing. So I think we have something like 6 climbers, normal route, a bunch of folks who have been waiting since
Yeah.
2020, as well as a couple of new folks. And so I'll be expedition leading the team as well as leading one of the private clients. And I'm just, yeah, so excited for what I hope will be a normal season.
Any thoughts on what China is? Are these delays coming out of Beijing or out of Lhasa? Are they part of the CTMA or the CMA, whatever acronym they're using
Yeah.
these days? What's going on there, you think, relative to
Of course,
climbing?
there's a little black box nature to doing business in China, and so I don't want to claim to be a China expert. But from what I saw, the TMA, CTMA, and all our contacts in Lhasa really were open and ready, and everything was exactly like it used to be in 2019. From the price list we received to the Tibet invitation letter process and the bio data they wanted. And then my impression is they had holdups from Beijing. So when they submitted to Beijing, there were additional steps that things needed to go through that took longer than planned for the reopening and for the approvals. So that's my understanding, and we'll see how things go next spring.
Yeah, well, cool. Yeah, that Ghost Everest climb, I guess the rumor mill out there has mainly reported through the Himalayan Times, says that was a ski trip going down the Hornbeam Kular. But
Yeah.
apparently they have now canceled that and pulled out entirely. I guess that too many delays there also, and now weather's moved in, so they've had to bag the whole thing. Hey, speaking of
Yeah.
Hornbeam Kular, I was very honored to go to Tom Hornbeam's memorial up in Estes Park a couple of weeks ago. Adrian, it was a who's
I
of
saw that.
climbers that was there, and it was the most uplifting, positive, loving collection and celebration of life I think I've ever participated in. Tom was just a
Wow. Oh, I
special human
love
being.
that.
Yeah, I got a chance to meet him a
Was there
couple
a
of times.
favorite story or moment that you heard? Anything that stands out?
There were so many, and they weren't necessarily climbing stories. They were just life stories. And it was about
Okay.
how Tom was such a giving human being, even up until the end. If people would tell stories from, back on the Everest days to him and, University as an anesthesiologist to his retirement, rock climbing Lumpy Ridge behind his house in Estes Park. And people would tell these stories that he would, they would ask him about something about Everest to West Ridge, and he would kind of give them a throwaway answer, but then he would turn it around and ask them about them. So, what have you climbed
Yeah.
recently? And what's your big project? What do you got planned? And they would find themselves telling him all about them, which he loved. So he was very much of
Oh,
a loving, giving human being, and such an inspiration to us all. Doing rock climbing at age 88 there on Lumpy Ridge, amazing.
amazing. Amazing. I mean, I went to a really hard memorial this past month of one of my guides who
Yes, yes.
was killed in a non work climbing accident. But one of the things I was reminded of, which it sounds like came through in the celebration of life you went to as well, is just like the power of climbing that it can have on us in terms of community and partnership and ways to process the hard things of life through climbing and through the experience we have outside together. And so while there are hard times, I love hearing those stories of kind of like the reasons we do these things are still
Right.
true, right? And all the way
Right.
up to Everest and all the bullshit on Everest and all the circus. It's like I know you believe and I believe the experience is still incredibly powerful and meaningful, and we're not going to lose that.
Well said, my friend. This is a good segue to get into one of the more difficult subjects. Muhammad Hassan, 27-year-old father of three, caring for his family, porter, no real climbing experience, really a trekking porter in Pakistan, fell well, he died on K2 at the traverse just above the bottleneck. Reports have that it was really sugar snow and he fell on that really narrow section. I know you know it
Yep.
well. I do too. I
As
know
do
exactly.
you.
Yeah, but man, I think we both know precisely where he fell, and that is an area that I know that when I was going across, holding on to that fixed rope and front pointing into that wall, I would just say to myself,
Yeah.
Alan, if you fall, you're done because this rope is a placebo.
Yep.
But in this
Yep.
case, the rope did hold him, and he fell, and there were efforts to try to save his life, but sadly that didn't happen. There's been a lot written about it. There's been even more speculation about it. There's been media reports that have been both accurate and inaccurate, trying to villainize different people. Adrian, I don't really want to go down that route because neither one of us were there. I did do
That's right.
a podcast over an hour with Kristen Harla and who her team tried to save him. And I think anybody that really wants to hear directly from a person that was there should listen to that podcast. But I want to
Yep.
ask you, Adrian, about this whole one of the big controversies that came out of it was the reports that hundreds or scores of people stepped over his body either after he had died or while he was dying, and people didn't try to render aid to him, even though people did try to render aid to him. People that came up saw other people there but chose to keep going. And this is one of those subjects in mountaineering which is really, really difficult. And I think everybody has an opinion about it. Some people's opinions are founded in experience, other people's are founded in morality. I'm not one to tell one person that they're right or wrong, but in general, let me start with the higher picture of Alpenglow as a company. Do you have a written or stated policy or philosophy that when you're guiding clients, you come upon another climber, and it doesn't matter whether they're for hire or they're a member or whatever, a liaison officer that's in trouble. Do you have a policy or a philosophy on how you handle that situation?
Yeah, like you started exactly where I would start with. These are incredibly complicated issues, and I do think it's really important not to, you know, try to be there in the moment. We need to learn from these experiences, but try not to, assume that we know exactly what happened on that ledge, because they are incredibly complicated, dangerous places to be making these really hard decisions. And that kind of ties into how Alpenglow handles situations like this. We do not have a written policy because we are such a small company. The number of lead guides that work on the big Himalayan mountains, we're 5 people and only 3 expedition leaders, including me. And so we just spend a lot of time in the mountains climbing together and talking about things and debriefing things. And so that's how we're on the same page. And I hope Alpenglow always stays true to that. We're a group of friends and a small team first. But with that said, like, it's something we talk about with every expedition. We as a team often talk about what we're going to do in different scenarios on the mountain or what we have done in the past. And there's a lot of sort of media and marketing out there right now about teams with 100% success rates on the big mountains. And Alpenglow kind of proudly talks to all of our clients about 100% success in the mountains not being a real thing. And
Right.
there are reasons for that, how conservative we are in our decision making around risk, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in this conversation. But the second one is that I want my team members, my clients from day one to know that turning on around on a mountain to save a teammate or another climber on the mountain is thing that happens. It's happened numerous times in my career, and I will never feel bad about not summiting a mountain to try to save someone's life. And ultimately, some of those experiences are more memorable experiences that I've had in the big mountains. You know, in some ways, today with all the oxygen and all the fixed ropes and all the Sherpa support, summiting an 8,000-meter peak is a very attainable goal. Saving a life of someone that has a broken leg or high altitude cerebral edema in the death zone, that is an incredibly difficult to succeed at accomplishment, and I think might be a more meaningful thing. So we try to share those experiences. We finally get into the good stuff, and Elon Musk fails us, Alan. I'm not sure when I lost you, but I was talking just a little bit about Russell Bryce, and really Russell drilling these kind of like lessons of the big mountains into me and his teams. You know, he was kind of famous for describing every dead body that you might pass on the north side of the mountain and telling each of their stories. And it wasn't like ghoulish. It was to explain to people the risk is still real.
Yeah.
And that these are things we might encounter, and that human life comes first. And we really tried to stand behind that. But I do want to caveat that with one of the challenges for our mountain guides on these big mountains is, as more and more people go to the mountains without experience and hire teams that are inadequately prepared and resourced, there is an unfairness that some of our clients feel where they're paying for resources. We bring somewhere in the vicinity of 25 to 30% extra oxygen, and on each expedition, a lot of that oxygen goes to teams that are under-resourced in a regular season. Our expedition doctor is often on the satellite phone, not coaching my guides how to save our clients, but how to save other people on the mountain. And our clients see and feel this. And so there is a risk of unfairness. And so I do want to say, like, it's not easy to stop for every single person struggling on the mountain. And so my guides often have to make difficult decisions like, is this person who's struggling on the mountain, is this a risk of life or limb? Okay, then there's no question, we stop and help. But is this just someone who's having a really awful day and gonna struggle and might even get a little frostbite? Well, that might not mean turning around from our summit push and giving up our oxygen and things like that. And those decisions weigh on our guide team, on our expedition leaders, on our Sherpa. It's just part of the game. But I do want to say they're not easy decisions.
You know, the analogy that I use is that you're driving down, say a divided highway, and you come upon just this really tragic, just horrific car accident, and you know in your heart that there's some really people that are very badly hurt. However, you do see ambulance there, police there, people helping. So what are your choices? Do you come upon that accident? Do you turn around and go home? Do you slow down and respectfully go by and then get to your destination? Or do you stop your car and get out and go see if you can help, even though you don't have any medical training? And that's kind of analogous, that you come upon somebody on the mountain, there's other people trying to help them. So do you stop then and turn around? And I know, and I will say this very clearly, that if I had come upon Muhammad Hassan, I have zero medical training. I'm not even wilderness first responder. I would have been more of a liability than an asset in trying to help him, other than providing perhaps comfort, or and I can't give up my oxygen, because if I give up my oxygen, I'm going to die. And so the first rule of being a responder is that you don't become the victim.
Absolutely.
This is one of those situations where I think it's very situational. And, so what do you do? And maybe the best thing to do is just get out of the way. And that could be turning around and going back down, or it could be, going on to get out of the way. Again,
Yep.
I think
Yep.
that every person would have to answer that question for themselves. And for some people, it's perfectly clear. For other people, it's a little more fuzzy. I think it depends upon your experience.
Absolutely. Yep. That's right. And I will say, I do believe, certainly in my experience, like co- cooperation amongst teams in emergencies is alive and well. Like that is something that I've always seen, that like we will compete vigorously in the
Right.
social media marketplace and things like that.
Yeah.
But when things happen on the mountain, I have always seen teams pull together and help each other. And you know, we really need to not lose that, because this environment is still brutal, as we know,
Yeah.
and it will have big tolls on us. And so, as the marketplace grows, as the companies don't know each other as well, I do worry about that cooperation and the levels of it. But thus far, in my experience, I'm still seeing it. And the best example I have is Alpenglow actually did have an accident this season in Bolivia, and we had a climber with a badly injured leg, but in a difficult place. And within 12 hours, we had 9 mountain guides from
Wow.
4 different companies helping to get that person out, because there are no helicopters available in Bolivia. And like, there was no question that competitors were working together to have the best possible resolution for the climber, and the climber's doing well and got back to the US and had the surgeries he
Right.
needs. And so, like, I felt that again as an expedition operator and owner at home, not in the field. I felt that support.
Yeah, I've told the story 1,000 times, and just the headline is that when I broke my leg in 3 places up here on Twin Sisters in Rocky Mountain National Park, there were 40 volunteers from 2 different search and rescues that came up on a Friday night with 60-mile-an-hour winds to in February to carry my sorry butt down the mountain. So
Yep. Yep.
I see that cooperation. That there's this saying. I love this. The catch line is that there's a competition off the mountain, cooperation on the mountain. So that
I
pretty
love
well
that.
sums up. Yeah. Some of the things talking about how to avoid some of these things in the future. There's been talk about forever simulating reproducing what they do on Denali, which is where they have a permanent ranger team stationed at the 14,000-foot camp, the ranger camp, the basing camp, and they have them
Yep.
there throughout the season. And I've always thought that the Expedition Operators Association in Nepal and the Pakistani group could station people at like Camp 2 on K2 or at the South Col on a rotating basis during the peak summit push. And so if there is a disaster that happens, if somebody does get in trouble, then you've got a team of highly trained, well provisioned experts that can be dispatched to go help them. I don't understand why
Yes.
Pakistan, if they do that in Aconcagua, they do it, Denali. It's not that
Yep.
hard to do. Why do you think Pakistan and especially Nepal doesn't do that on Everest?
I mean, it absolutely has to happen and will happen. And the examples you gave are great ones of countries where that has happened. And, I think we just have to see, the countries are in the early stages of managing their mountains. I think that's the reason why it hasn't happened yet. And everyone's trying to figure out how best to do it. Even China, China deciding to shut down Shishapangma 2 days ago. Like, I can understand why the country chose to do that, but a lot of my climber friends say risk is part of the mountains. A country shouldn't, shut down a mountain or a route just because it's dangerous. And you know, but I see that as China like trying to figure out the steps to make the sport as safe as it can be, while still allowing for mountain tourism and things like that. And I do think these countries, Nepal and Pakistan, have a responsibility, especially as the commercial aspect becomes so much larger. So I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, but while I think every individual climber should have the right to take as much risk as they choose, whether that's paragliding, base jumping, ski descent, or just climbing, I think that's your right to go and take as much risk as you want in the mountains. But as soon as you hire people, so there's money involved in commercial operations, there is an obligation of safety to the workers of those companies. And that takes regulation from governments. It just does. I love capitalism and I'm a staunch capitalist. I've probably said that on your podcast before, but the reality is capitalism needs guardrails. And I think the guiding industry in Nepal and Pakistan right now is a demonstration of that, that we need smart, sensible, enforceable regulations on the companies running trips. So that's a little bit of, a sideways from rescue teams, but rescue teams are complicated, right? The
Yeah,
government's taking on
yeah,
a lot of that risk of the most dangerous job on the mountain. And so while it's very obvious to us that the mountains need it, it will take expertise and it will take a willingness to have accidents amongst the rescue teams that maybe the government's just aren't ready to dive into yet. What I kind of hope is there's a collaboration amongst, like well-known, respected Sherpa, maybe a well-known, respected, expedition leader. I could see Conrad starting an incredible, team, or being a part of starting a team and supporting and fundraising for a team and learning. You imagine bringing Denali Rangers to Everest to help
right.
to educate how that's done, or Chamonix rescuers. The Chamonix pilots did such a good job of teaching the local pilots. Now I think we need the same thing for a rescue team. So I do believe
You know,
we'll
the
get there.
the other element of that is personal responsibility and self-sufficiency by the clients or the members, that I'm not sure people really recognize that when they go on one of these big climbs. Often they're told, oh, if you get in trouble, there are helicopters, or we've summited X number of times, so we're experts, and those type of attributes. I don't think they understand that if I get in trouble, I'm going to need help, and that
Yep.
now is going to put other people at risk, because
Yeah.
you simply can't carry a let's say an unconscious full grown adult down a mountain by yourself. I mean, we've seen some examples where, like last year on Everest, or this past year, there was a Sherpa that had a guy on his in his backpack, carried him really from the balcony down to the South Col. That's incredibly rare, but to carry a person down requires
It's
multiple
incredible.
people to do that. And that puts those people at risk. And but often Sherpas get what are hazard pay for
Yep.
rescuing people. So it's not a foregone conclusion that, oh, well, let's just go help that person. They'll put their arm around you and help them walk down the mountain, especially if they're
No.
they, like you say, got haste or HAPE or a broken limb or something.
Yeah, and I mean, this comes back to the marketing side of 8,000-meter peak climbing, right? We need to be educating our clients that it is still incredibly dangerous. Rescue is not a guarantee,
Right.
and no matter how much money you spend or how famous the people who guide you are, or how qualified the company, you're still accepting risk, exactly like
Right.
you just described.
Yeah.
And you can manage and mitigate risk, but if you're not sure that you're choosing to do this thing because you're willing to take risk, it's not the place to be. It's truly not. And and you're right that we do take we're putting risk not only on ourselves but on others, and that is an interesting counterpoint to what I said, that I think anyone should be able to take as much risk as they want. That is the interesting balance counter argument to that, is like, but what about all the people who will try to rescue you?
Yeah.
And those are good questions.
Yeah. So this takes us into the next subject about these tragic deaths of four people on Shishapangma this past weekend. They all four died in two separate avalanche situations on their summit push. Apparently, it had been snowing fairly heavy in the previous days, and avalanche awareness training dictates that you give really heavy fresh snow at minimum 24, if not 72 hours to bond to the other layers before you go up. Otherwise, you'll trigger, the chances of you triggering an avalanche are extremely high. You know better than I do, but I would guess that 98% of the casualties that happen in the high country and the mountains by avalanches are preventable or avoidable, and mostly caused by humans, not by a natural movement of the terrain. In this case, they happened twice within hours of one another. And again, talk a little bit about your experience with climbing in avalanche conditions, and how do you read the mountain? I know that all of your guys are IFMGA certified, which means they have avalanche awareness, extensive avalanche awareness
That's
training.
right.
And maybe, a situation where you chose not to climb when the avalanche conditions were were so tough.
Sure. I mean, and again, you and I both feel the same way. We know we were not there on Shishapangma, and so it's really hard to talk about specifics. And we're not talking about specifics. We weren't there. I don't know what the avalanche conditions were or what decision I would have made in that exact moment. And I really do just
Yeah.
feel for obviously all the people lost and all the people grieving for those climbers. But yeah, avalanches are this wild, interesting part of what we deal with in the mountains. And I've lost more friends and loved ones to avalanches than to anything else, rockfall or cancer or car accidents. Like avalanches have taken a lot of people out, and it wasn't because they all were irresponsible or uneducated. So one of the funny things about avalanches is there's so much science behind it. And then there's like unknowns. Many of the most, there have been avalanche accidents with some of the most experienced avalanche professionals in the world. And I think the hard thing is that, especially in skiing, the highest avalanche condition.
Okay, you're back.
You're gonna have your work cut out for you cutting out the dead spots, Alan. I'm sorry. Usually it's better. I don't know if the mountains are in the way or what.
Solar flares.
So really quickly, you said I was making an important point. What was I talking about?
About being behind the mountain in avalanche. And oddly enough, you were saying the most trained people often have died in the mountains.
Okay, great. Yeah, so some of the most experienced avalanche professionals have had avalanche accidents decades into their career. So it's just not 100% clear. There's a science to avalanche mitigation and management, but there's also kind of, like we say, an art, right? The unknown of it. And a lot of times, especially in skiing, the best skiing conditions are when avalanche danger is quite high, because we love powder skiing and fresh snow before it settles.
Yeah.
So especially in skiing in the big mountains, there's some balance there that makes for really difficult decisions. I think that's part of why, as well as, like, I want to be very clear, I've had luck in my career, which is part of why I'm still here, let's say that. But also I think I've chosen to be very conservative in the mountains around avalanche decision making, especially when I have clients or workers, other guides, Sherpa, high altitude workers, working, because I know I can't control those things. And so, all of that is to say, like, we need to continue educating everyone who's working in the mountains as much as we can around the science of avalanches. And then I think we need an incredible humility. Challenges for me over the past few years of guiding in the big mountains as the industry is growing, and kind of the how many people now see and are interested in 8,000 meter peak climbing, how much more fame is being gained through 8,000 meter peak climbing and mountaineering, which I am certainly a product of that as well, and a part of the problem. But as those things have happened, I've seen a lessening of humility, of understanding how little control we do have sometimes in the mountains, especially during storm cycles, and kind of conservative decision making that goes along with that. And so, if there's anything, I hope, like, when I think about the Shishapangma accident, which again I wasn't there, but what I do know is all 4 people killed had also seen incredibly dangerous avalanche conditions on Manaslu the year before, and on other mountains that they encountered, and either had near misses or fatalities happen around them. And so, like, the danger was clearly understood, and the decisions to continue were made otherwise. And like, I just want to, if there's one message I want to have, it's like that, the mountain has this power, and deaths will always be a part of it. And if choosing to take those outsized risks, it just has to be really clear why they're worth it and who's making those decisions. And again, I think when money isn't happened and how it can be avoided in the future, is that type of analysis being done in the big mountains? I think it should be.
Yeah, you broke up a little bit. You were saying when money was involved. I think we got your point. I want to get to, because that's a great segue, when money is involved, but you got to know why you're there and is it worth the risk? And that's going to lead us into our final topic, which is going to be about records and all the records in the mountains and people having records taken away and going for them. That's another one of these messy hairballs. But I want to, before we leave this subject, I think you were with Russell Bryce in either 12 or 13 on Everest when he made a decision to cancel the
12.
entire expedition in 2012 because of fear of the Serac releasing onto the ice fall, which it in fact did exactly that 2 years later in 2014,
right.
taking 15 plus lives in the ice fall. But that always, to me, that was, I remember writing the season summary that year, and I called it a case study in risk management. And really what we're talking about here is risk management. You talked about last year on Manaslu. That was a case where half of the operators there stopped in mid-season because they felt the risk were too great of avalanche, and then another half stayed until the last minute. And there were deaths from avalanches in that interim time. Risk management is something that, as an operator, you've got this tremendous pressure on you that you've got your client. And in fact, we've even had some operators have been sued recently for not giving their client a chance to go to the summit. They haven't, by the way, to my knowledge, no lawsuit has ever been won in that particular, that particular case. But as an operator, you've got your client pressure, you've got your own, pressure of keeping your company, the track record. Personally, I think safety is more important than summits, but nonetheless, some companies, as you say, like to tout their 100% record, which in many cases is faulty math, because they're talking about the people who left from high camp, not the people who arrived at base camp. So this is,
absolutely
damn lies, and statistics going on here that you can fudge the numbers any way you want to. So my advice to people always is, if you see somebody that claims 100% success rate, run as fast as you can, because that's simply not true. So what else are they not telling you? But just very brief, risk management. How do you evaluate that pressure between your client? And I think this is a softball question, but nonetheless, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, it is a softball question, because I think, we are lucky, again, as a small company, and that's what we choose to be, that we really have relationships with our clients, and we've climbed with them before, and they understand, and they've chosen us for kind of like how we approach big mountains. And so the conflict between like need for success and the need for fame, or the pressure of so much money, like, we don't tend to feel those things as strongly as I think some others do in the industry. But risk management is still difficult, and it's because of the unknowns that are out there, right? Like, and I think we have to start there, is as guides, as expedition leaders, we don't know black and white whether the mountain is safe or not. And so we're all having to work in that gray area. And I think, like, acknowledging that first and talking about that is really important. And then I think once you have that kind of like as the foundation of your decision-making structure, you can more honestly talk about these things with your clients and bring them into the process of what's worth it, why it's worth it, and how much risk should we take on any given day. Because every day is different and every project is different. And when we talk about record seekers and things like that, I think, everyone's motivations to go climb in the big mountains are different. And I don't think we should be, personally, I don't want to judge whose motivations are pure or not pure, or what is worth it and what is not worth it. I just know for myself that I think we talked about this when I climbed K2, like, being under the bottleneck for so many hours. I was so clear in my brain, like what I've always done for a number of years now is that if I end up dead in the puppy white cloud looking down at my life that I no longer get to be a part of, am I going to feel like what I was going after was worth losing all of those wonderful things? And so that's just the game I play with myself now. And I know for myself that like thousands more Instagram followers wouldn't make that calculation worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah.
A nicer house because I made more money in my career wouldn't make that worthwhile. A passion for wanting to climb the second tallest mountain in the world without oxygen that I've dreamt about since I was 14 years old might make that worthwhile. It did make it worthwhile to try, even though I was conflicted. And
Yeah.
so if your motivations are pure to you and you can explain and own them, whether it's a record or a single mountain that you've dreamt about since you were a kid, like I say, go for it. But have those hard questions. And for me, it's not only having those hard questions with myself, it's Emily, who understands risk mountains incredibly well,
Yeah.
quizzing me and challenging me and pushing me on whether it's worthwhile, and me doing the same for her. And that's always work that I've felt like I'm in the right place at the right time when I'm on the mountain. And then just one more quick thing you asked about like personal experience. It's really funny. I saw Simone Mori in this same storm system that hit Tibet. And one of my like favorite memories, but at the time hardest moments, was turning around. I turned around in 2004 on Pumori, less than 100 feet from the summit, to where my friends in Everest Base Camp, watching me through their telescope, congratulated me when we got back down for summiting. And we turned around because we had whooping and cracking, and we turned around and came down. And it's experiences like that have kind of like my life continued, right? Like people still were my friends. My career continued even though I failed. And so like it's experiences like that in my early 20s that helped to teach me like failure is okay and essential to mountaineering. And I'm going to talk about my failures and share them and try to celebrate them, even though they do hurt. They suck, right? Like it sucked walking into Everest Base Camp and telling everyone how I failed. But that decision wasn't like easy in the moment, but looking back at it, it should have been easy. And so, just trying to like remember those experiences and share those stories, and hoping other people like Simone during that experience just a couple of days ago. I just loved reading that story.
Yeah. I often say that a failure in the mountains, first off, I never used the word failure. I call them non-summits. And
nice.
But I say a failure is when you try something hard, you don't achieve it, you don't learn from it, and so really not achieving your objective is just another series of lessons throughout life that we go through. As we wrap up here, with this in and out, let's just kind of try to get this one done. These records that are going on, I think you just answered the question about, why do people go for records? And one of the things I do with my Summit Coach Consulting is that we talk a lot about why. Why do you want to go do this? You just talked about that with you and Emily, that you kind of test each other to say, okay, why is this important to you? This is going to be a pretty tough one. You just came on the stands and climbed a big mountain. You skied a big mountain over there. That'd be another great subject to talk about. But these records that people are going after, obviously, it's meaningful to them. And I think, like you, I'm not going to judge them for wanting to go for the records. They want to do it. That's fine. I think where it begins to get squishy is that how do you compare these records that are happening today with the records that they quote unquote break? And they were done maybe 10, 20, 50 years ago in the case of Messner having his records taken away. When Messner has his records taken away, I mean, that's not even comparable, to how he climbed his style versus how people are climbing today. Any broad thoughts on the record going for the records today, and not the motivation of the individual, but just kind of this broad topic of style and how do you compare? It's like criticizing somebody for for taking a boat across the Atlantic versus flying over the Atlantic. Well, that boat was really slow. Well, I'm sorry, there were no
Totally.
airplanes then.
I mean, yeah, the whole Guinness Book record taking away things like that, like, you know, to me, it was just a little bit silly, and I think to a lot of people in the sport and in the know. But what it is it's the mainstream trying to understand our sport and our motivations and
Mm.
how to compare. Like they, the mainstream wants a playing field and rules and umpires and referees like sport has, and we call what we do a sport. And so I understand why they're trying to like put it into boxes and understand it, and there are rules, and so you can apply those rules 50 years ago, and but it's not that, and it's never been that. It's never been that clear, right? And you and I have talked on this podcast before that every ascent has asterisks, and we need to like explain our asterisks, and that and the asterisks today of a record setter today are entirely different than the asterisks of 50 or 60 years ago. But so style is so important in our sport. And I think the third season of Climbing Gold, Alex Honnold and Fitz Cahal's podcast, is all about style because our sport doesn't have black and white rules. So it's all about style. Um, and I love that and I embrace that. And I think we just have to keep talking about it and debating it and being honest about it. And I think, we shouldn't pretend that what we're doing today is exactly the same as what was being done then. But I think the motivation might be similar. What was being done then, whether in the 1920s or in the 1950s, it was all about exploration and pushing the limits and boundaries, right? Well, today it's a lot harder to push the limit or boundary by climbing an unclimbed peak or even an unclimbed route on a peak because so many of the safer objectives out there have been done. And so humans are still trying to find ways to explore. And I think we see that with like fastest known times, like what Kilian does and what just happened on Manaslu. We see it with trying to ski down peaks. We see it with trying to paraglide off peaks. The search for human limits and exploration is still alive and well. But it's in these like kind of edges of the sport, and then that is ripe for maybe taking advantage of, as we've both seen kind of the claiming of human exploration at the edges, which maybe are more about lists and things like I said I love that people are still trying to explore the human limits of human performance and what's out there and exploring, and there are also plenty of people out there to keep us honest. And I don't, somewhere in there's a balance.
I love that. I love that comparison. That today, perhaps two things you said I really like. One is that this controversy about Guinness World Book of Records is really a way of trying to explain our sport to the masses. And you're right. Climbing, other than in the Olympics, is not the Olympics. There's really no rules. And then secondly, is that exploration and adventure today is it still exists. And I think people, chasing lists and checkoff items, again, if they want to do that, that's fine. But it's not becoming newsworthy. And in some cases, it's noteworthy to the individual, but not newsworthy, to the masses. So I'm all for if people want to go chase records and chase lists, the 50 high points, the 14ers, the second 14ers, the second seven summits, whatever it is. I mean, go for it. And because when you finish that, that's going to be meaningful to you. And to me, that's what this sport is all about. It's, it used 100. To be back in the 50s and 70s, with the Whitakers and all that, it was a team. It was a team that was made up of individuals, but if one person summited, they all summited. That they came back home celebrating that team success. And today, it's a team of individuals celebrating individual success. That's just the way it is. I mean, we're not going to change that. That's just the way, that's how
Yep.
the sport's evolved. Commercialization has been an enabler to that because it allows people like me that, I don't have 15 friends that I can put together to go climb K2, but I can go
Yep.
with Garrett and a couple other people and run over and try to do it,
Yep.
because he serves as an aggregator. That's just the way
Yep.
the business model has evolved. We no longer
Yep.
fly in single seat airplanes. We fly in airplanes with 200 or 300 other people. So
Absolutely. And think about how much joy and learning is still being created
yeah,
on those
absolutely.
mountains. Like, I'm an optimist, but I really believe that whether it's the list change operators or the top of the end privates, like, I know lives are still being changed in these sports. And that's the bottom line. That's why I do what I do. That's why I encourage more people to get outside and do hard human powered things in the mountains. And that hasn't changed. And so I in no way want to beat up on that motivation or, I think there's room in the mountains for more people. But of course, we got to get our safety and ethics and morals
Yeah,
together as a commercial industry. Like,
yeah, you bet.
or the downsides will become greater than the upsides, and
Yeah,
that will be a loss to everyone who loves these activities.
absolutely. Great way to close. Thank you, Adrian Bollinger, for your time, your wisdom, your experience,
Uh,
sharing it with us. I'm a little
sure.
worried that you're running out of quarters to put into the Starlink machine to keep it going. Apparently, that's just a coin-fed satellite system.
Well, I really appreciate your patience and your editing skills of making this not too painful for your listeners. And I promise the next time we schedule one of these, I'll be in better Wi-Fi.
You know what? Maybe next time we could do it in person.
That'd be great. I'd love that.
That would be fun, wouldn't it? All right, AB, you and the family have a great time. And if you do summit that thing behind you, I want to see a picture of you
Yeah.
on the true summit, not 5 meters below.
That sounds great. All right. Thanks for the time, Al.